Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Escaño. I am on the events team for the Enablement Squad. And just a little bit of info here. The Enablement Squad is one of the largest open communities of enablement professional. And our mission is to engage, educate, and empower enablement professionals across industries and globe. Love it. We're here to talk about an exciting topic, which is the buyer enablement revolution and why sales deal rooms are the answer. And this webinar is in partnership with Doc. We'll go into a brief history of the sales enablement tools, why buyers buy and how the selling environment has changed, and why sales deal rooms are a win for buyers, sellers, and enablement teams. To start it off, I will pass it to Alex Kracov, and we spoke about his last name, and I hope I got it right. He is
You
the
did great.
CEO. Thank you. He's the CEO and co-founder of Doc. And we will also hear from our very own Matt Schalsey. And please correct me if I'm wrong with your last name. I'm on a roll
You're
today.
right on it. You're on it.
He is the co-founder of the Enablement Squad. And we'll hear from Scott Jacobson, and he's a revenue enablement specialist at Jamf. So, Alex, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro. Thanks for getting my name. It's funny. My own family disagrees on how to say my last name. It's funny, but yeah, Kracov is how my side of the family likes to say it. But super excited to be here today. Thank you so much for the squad for partnering with us. We've been building Doc and thinking about Doc quietly for a couple of years now, and it's really awesome to get in front of more enablement folks and share how we see the market changing, how we see things evolving. Yeah, super excited to get into it today. I love this Zoom format. We can keep it pretty casual. And so I'm going to run through a few slides. I will try not to make it boring. I don't want to bore you with too much slideware, but I just want to set the stage on what we're talking about today, how we see that market evolving. Then we'll do a little a panel conversation and just talk about how Zach and Matt are using deal rooms at our company. And then Q&A at the end. I would love to have a roundtable conversation where we all jam and talk about deal rooms, talk about buyer enablement. How are we doing that at our own orgs? And I'll try and facilitate that conversation. But please ask questions and would love to make this as interactive as we can. All right, let me share my screen here. Cool. You should be able to see my screen now.
We're good.
Cool. Let's make it bigger. Beautiful. All right. Thank you. All right. Buyer enablement revolution and why sales deal rooms are the answer. So we're going to talk a lot about this concept of buyer enablement today. And my preview on my thesis is I think this is the future of sales and sales enablement. Cool. So a little bit about me. So I started this company, Doc, about 3 years ago. But before that, I worked at this company called Lattice. It's this HR tech company. We did performance management software. And I was lucky enough to join it really early on as the third employee, first marketing hire. And I ran marketing there for almost 5 years. And we experienced a ton of growth, right? This was classic ZERP era, scaling businesses, right? The company just grew insanely fast over the 5 years I was there. And I like to think I had somewhat of a hand at helping do that. And a huge part of my role was enablement, right? Enabling the internal marketing team, enabling the sales team. I approached it oftentimes from the marketing perspective, product marketing. How do we enable around launches? How do we train new reps? But I often would partner a lot with the sales enablement team. And we actually didn't even have a sales enablement team for a while at us. So I was doing a lot of that in partnership with the sales team. While I was at Lattice, I noticed this enablement challenge, which we can get into, and built a prototype of Doc, a crappy version of it, and then quit a few years ago to start Doc. And the quick version of what Doc is, it's a client-facing workspace you can use across the customer lifecycle. So you can use it as a sales deal room, you can use it as a customer onboarding portal, you can use it as a client portal for ongoing relationships. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. We're still a seed stage startup. And then a little personal stuff about me. I live in San Francisco. I'm actually a new dad. I have a 2-month-old at home. My wife is watching him while I'm trying to watch the dog as I do this webinar. So if you hear a dog bark, I'm sorry. I'm a puppy. So Carter's the little boy and Bodhi's my puppy. All right. Enough about me. We already talked about the agenda, so I will skip over that. So from my standpoint, I think sales enablement has really historically focused internally, right? It has primarily been focused on sales reps, right? As an enablement function, we think about all right, how do we ramp sales reps faster? Right? How do we onboard them? Right? That was all one of the biggest ways to hit the company's numbers, right? The more reps we have, the better chance we'll have to hit those end of year goals. And so enablement, one of the primary functions of enablement historically has been on ramping sales reps. And then of course there's the ongoing training, right? Product certifications, if there's new products coming out, competitor training, different things like that. Again, it's all using the salesperson as the conduit to get to the buyer. Same thing with this finding content, finding sales content, organizing. We all have these giant content repositories where you can put your both internal facing content and external facing content. And then probably the least fun part of enablement and operations job is like the CRM hygiene side of things, right? Leadership wants their beautiful dashboards, but to get the dashboards, we need the reps to put in the information in the right ways. And so we are constantly coaching the reps on how do we get there. And so I think this has been a lot of what we focus on as a function over the last couple of years. And the solutions that have been built for the industry, both software and other, I think match this, right? And so there's a bunch of I tried to put it in 3 different categories. I'm sure there's others, but right, when it comes to finding sales content, right, companies are either using more internal wiki style solutions, think your Notions or Confluence or Gurus. Then when it comes to training sellers and finding sales content, there's these giant sales enablement platforms that kind of bridge the gap or do both things. Seismic, HighSpot, Showpad, MindTickle. There's this giant category of incumbent software there that both helps train sellers and find the content that they need. And it's been these amazing platforms that have transformed sales organizations. Then there's a bunch of point solutions that have emerged when it comes to training sellers, learning management systems like WorkRamp. And then every organization at some point is, let's roll out a sales methodology. And so we try and train sellers on Sandler and Medic, and I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting, but these are all things that we think about as we try and control that sales experience. And then it goes into, all right, how do we make sure that the customer data is correct? So again, we can get those dashboards, but then we can also coach sales reps as they need things. And Salesforce, HubSpot, CRMs are those main tools, but then we've tried to innovate there when it comes to things like Scratchpad, right, to make data entry a little bit easier for sellers. So I would say historically, we've really focused on the seller experience. But the selling environment has completely changed. And I think we can all violently agree with this, right? We went from this ZERP grow era to now we're all spread across the world, right? We probably have more distributed teams than ever. It makes it super hard to train different reps, ramp, especially junior AEs. It's really hard. It's hard to get visibility into what's going on. We've all been forced to do more with less, smaller teams, same big goals, and selling is just getting harder. Every deal seems to require CFO approval. Software budgets are shrinking. The way we think about it is like a SMB mid-market deal starts to feel almost like an enterprise deal where you need to multi-thread and build champions. And it's just this long sales cycle where you have to get buy-in. And so the selling environment has completely changed. And not only has the selling environment changed, but I would argue that the way buyers behave has completely evolved. And so this is a lot of stats, but I thought it was like a good summary of all the different things that buyers want out of the sales cycle today. And they care most about the sales experience, right? They want a personalized sales experience that helps them with their research, makes you look like the expert as the seller. And they want it to be consistent, authentic, transparent, trustworthy. And it's really about not only like what you're selling, but the vibe you're giving as you're selling. That's so important. People want deep partnerships with their sales teams. And so I think all of these things that are happening in the market are culminating into a big shift in the industry. And I would argue we need to shift our mindset from not just sales enablement, but also start really thinking about buyer enablement. How do we think more about the buyer experience? How do we help our sales teams enable buyers? I think this is like a really important shift for us to keep growing and being successful in this world. And so what does buyer enablement actually mean? The simplest way I think about it is how can you make it easy for your buyers to buy? But I think it's also really helping them meet their goals, right? It is not just trying to close the deal, right? It is really helping to solve problems and be a consultative seller. And so what does this mean in practice? I think the first thing I just was touching on, right? How do you help them meet their goals? How do you understand the buyer's problems and map it back to your solution? How do you co-create business cases? I think this is one of the most important things you can do to win deals today. And then how do you make sure that the buyer's actually making the right decision for their business? It's okay to recommend a competitor if you don't think it's a good fit, right? And you want to make sure that people are buying authentic solutions that actually meet their goals, because we all want customers who don't just churn at the end of the annual contract, but renew and build strong partnerships. And so it's all about how do you make sure that you're really having this honest conversation around a product fit and whether it's actually a good thing. I also see so many sales teams just create mutual action plans that are somewhat selfish for the sales rep, right? It's all the steps are like do legal review, sign the contract, close the deal, big money. And no, it's not about the sales plan for the sales team. It's about really building almost like an implementation plan. How do you build a roadmap to help the buyer meet their goals? Then it's also about supporting the buyer in their research. You want to put yourself in the buyer's mindset. They don't know a lot about your tools, your market, most likely. I think I saw some stat from Gartner that like in the entirety of a sales cycle, they'll probably only spend 5% of their time with you. And so most of what they're doing is collecting research, thinking about whether it works for them, whether your solution meets their problems. They're working internally with other folks. And you as the seller, as the sales team, really need to think about how do you help the buyer in that information gathering. And I also would argue that you should be upfront and transparent around pricing, although I know that might be a hot take for some sales orgs. But I think meeting buyers where they are, every buyer wants to know how much something costs. And even if you have complex pricing, it is really important to at least give them something there, or else it really hinders that research. Then the last piece I think about is trying before you buy. And every buyer today, people have been burned in the past by buying software that didn't really work for them. And so in some way, you need to give buyers a way to get a sense of how the product's going to work. And it's a spectrum, right? On one end, you can be doing product-led growth and free trial and never talking to the buyers. On others, you can maybe film a bunch of demo videos, or you can use what are those like tools like Walnut or Storylane to show the click pass. But you really want to give buyers a sense of what are they actually buying. And I think these are some of the principles of buyer enablement as how I think about it. But one of the best tools is deal rooms. And this is why I got so excited to build this company, is I think I saw this shift happening towards buyer enablement. And we really see deal rooms as being this great like methodology and tactic and software solution for buyers to work with sellers, because it brings both the buying team and the selling team together in one workspace where they can share information back and forth, collaborate on the deal. And it's also a win for enablement teams, which we'll get into. I would argue everything buyers want really aligns with deal rooms. And you can see a quick gif of going through a doc deal room. But if you remember that G2 slide from earlier, each of those stats, when I think of the pitch for a deal room, is that, right? A deal room delivers a premium, consistent buyer experience. It helps the buyer understand all the information that's happening in the sales process. It's a place where you can co-create a business case, one place for those consistent interactions, easy link to share and multi-thread. And I think it's a giant win for buyers. And that's why I think this category is really exploding. It's also a huge win for sales reps. It helps them save time in the sales cycle. The better buyer experience leads to higher close rates. Like one of our customers, Nectar, had increased their close rates by 31%. Like you get so much better data by using a deal room. I feel like on LinkedIn these days, everyone's talking about buyer intent signals. And most of the time it's being talked about in the vein of like outbound. But I think there's so much buyer intent information that you can get from using deal rooms throughout the sales evaluation process. And all those benefits that deal rooms help buyers also help sales reps. And so you can set up templates to make the follow-up easier. And I've included a few examples here of just like the data you can get from deal rooms and all sorts of stuff. And then deal rooms make sales enablement's lives easier. Like I would argue that you have a sales rep who joined your company on day one, and you don't even need to train them. You could just put them in a deal room and they'll have perfect follow-up every single time, right? And obviously they would suck at a demo call and talking live to a customer, but deal rooms make the follow-up perfect even on day one for a customer. And you can even use deal rooms to train rep, but it's the perfect follow-up every time. And it also helps develop a really clear framework for what gets shared. Like in the bottom here, you can see the nav bar of a deal room. And what you can do with deal rooms is pre-program all of the content that gets shared out throughout the customer lifecycle. And so you can develop this clear framework that basically says, hey, after the demo call, share this information. After this step of the evaluation, share this, and so on and so forth, and drip out content. It also means that you have fewer assets to maintain overall. Sorry, my dog. Instead of these giant content libraries, right, that you can actually reduce the number of assets and just put whatever assets work in the deal room. And then you can continually refine and maintain that. And you really get a good sense of what's actually getting shared with buyers. And also things with like bulk updating or syncing sections, you're able to like make these updates in real time as you roll out new pieces of collateral. And then deal rooms have also been found to be really successful in that sales to CS handoff that plagues every revenue team in history. This was a big learning for me, but it really is this consistent customer experience that you're able to give your your customers, but then the handoff notes, all the information, the deal, you're able to kind of transition. And all these benefits are why deal rooms are moving up the hype cycle. And so this is Gartner's famous hype cycle, and you can see deal rooms just moving towards the top there. Now, when you think about the deal room category, not all deal rooms are the same. And I think it's oftentimes where these tools started. So all the giant sales enablement players, Seismic, HighSpot, have these amazing content repositories and learning management tools, and they have a little deal room module. Then you have things like DocSend, Point Drive that are real content, and they can be used as a deal room. Then oftentimes you see Notion pages being repurposed as a deal room, or Google Slides acting as a deal room. Then you have all these CPQ tools, the deal hubs, get accepts of the world, who have a thing called deal room, but it's really a place just for the sales proposal to live, and then they've bolted on some content. Then you have this new category of DSR point solutions, right? Align, Flowla, Trumpet. These are all tools that have taken more of a modern web-based approach to building deal rooms. And then you have some that are really mutual action plan centric. So as you think about the market, as you think about using deal rooms for your organization, you want to think about, I think, through this lens. And as I do my own competitive analysis through Doc, this is how I think about it. And where does Doc fit into something I would love to share? We combine, I think, and we're trying to combine all those different categories. We have the capabilities of that modern deal room solution with the robustness of a content management system like a Seismic and HighSpot, collaboration tools like Google Doc, project management like Asana, and a CPQ like solution like a Deal Hub. And as we build Doc, we're like trying to get to feature parity on all these different fronts, but that's how we think about it. And what makes Doc, I think, really unique, and what's been surprising as I build it, is you can use Doc across that customer lifecycle. So it's not just a deal room, which is where we started the company, but we found an enormous kind of product pull into customer onboarding world. Loom, for example, uses us for customer onboarding. And then my old company, Lattice, started using us more as a client portal and renewals and different things like that. And yeah, this is how we think about using Doc across the customer lifecycle. And so yeah, when you think about purchasing a deal room, think about all these different characteristics. I won't read this slide to you, but you want to think about what part of a deal room is most important to you, which of those characteristics, because there's no wrong answer. It's just however you want it to fit in your tech stack. How do you see it being used in your sales process? And yeah, I think that's it. So thank you so much for listening to the slides. Hopefully my dog wasn't barking too much. I was looking at the chat, but we can get into questions. Yeah. Yes, my dog does share passions for deal rooms. I've been training him as our next AE. Alrighty. All right, let me pull up my questions here. So I'm super excited to do a little fireside chat or panel, whatever you want to call it, with Matt and Zach. And I would love to maybe start with you, Matt. And do you agree that now is the era for file enablement? Do you agree with kind of the premise in the deck that I shared?
I do. It's funny. So I was thinking about this when you were going through that, and I was like very heavily focused on one point of like customer enablement, right? That was a big area that we really started focusing is how do we retain those customers? And sales enablement, revenue enablement, right? We've always driven like how do we get our sellers to be more of a partner than a vendor? But we never focused on actually getting them in through the door. Like we've done go-to-market plays, we've done high-class marketing, we've done really guerrilla strategic word of mouth, strategic accounts, buying groups, all of that. But how do we actually enable that? So I think now more than ever, it's not necessarily the AE or the BDR, in my opinion, that's really making the sale. It's the community that the prospect or prospective client actually is in and what they're saying about it is too. So how do we enable them by use cases, reference materials, having everything all in one good spot to be able to have them, equipped and ready to answer any of those questions that they need to have internally to be able to deliver that information to make a deal go through.
And I think your answer like shows the value of the squad too, because I think so much of like buying decisions happen in these like peer groups talking to friends and then communities. It's like these like the dark social thing that everyone talks about, and it's you as the seller need to control that narrative as much as you can and try and put your stake in the ground. And yeah, the old slide deck I think is hard to do that. Zach, what do you think? Does this resonate with you? This premise?
Yeah, for sure. I think this concept is nothing new. Matt talked about. We've thought about things like how do we enable along the customer journey, and I think this is an experience we've all lived, right? Post-COVID, where everything is so digital, and us as buyers even have more information and options and expectations than ever before. And what I love about the idea of buyer enablement is that it acknowledges that change, and it's almost a whole enablement approach in and of itself that it adjusts for that change.
And Zach, like I think you're just starting to roll out deal rooms at your company.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like the decision process to start using a deal room, and then how's it been going so far? Where are you at in that process?
Yeah, for sure. So a little background, we're in the middle of our implementation. We're just starting to roll it out to a lot of reps. We're getting a lot of hype around it. Everyone's excited. But we started this when it was essentially launched as an add-on to our content repository system. And then we realized, hey, this is really something we want to run with. It solves a lot of issues that our buyers were having. And so we've involved a few different teams, mostly our enterprise teams, people that have some larger projects, because as you described, deal rooms, digital sales rooms are great for that customer journey. And that's how we've been defining it with our reps to really help them understand what they do. So it's not a moment in time, it's your journey with Jamf. And that's how we've really been framing it for our reps to use. Create that digital sales room after a little bit of discovery. Walk through how you're going to use it. Keep pointing them back there for all of your content, and then continue to update and further personalize it throughout that journey.
And Zach, did you build a template like for it? Who built the template? Did the sales enablement team say, okay, do this after this stage, that, or did you make it a little bit more free form for reps? Like, how did you think about like the content and stuff you were actually putting in there?
Yeah, great question. And I've talked to some peers who have been implementing digital rooms too and heard a few different approaches. But what we did was make one template, but then we encouraged this small kind of beta users group to run with it. So some of them have even gone off and made a dozen templates for it that they've then shared with their teams. But we just provided a really slimmed down basic template number one with instructions on how to personalize it if they really want to dive into digital sales rooms.
And then Matt, been your experience with deal rooms? I think you're already implemented a little farther along than Zach and JF. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have been using deal rooms for almost about a year now. We had a very slow adoption with it, very similar to Zach, right? We did a small implementation rollout with some beta users, and they actually found it very intriguing. We actually saw our win rates actually increase as well too. So Alex, it's good to see that you and I are seeing the same metrics there, but we actually saw a 28% increase in our closed won for every deal that had a deal room attached to it. That was huge for us as we were rolling this out. The other part of our deal rooms is once we did our full extensive rollout, we actually did this during SCO. And it was interesting because a lot of our reps are seasoned, tenured. They've been selling for 20 plus years. They don't want to learn something new. But the way that I actually shared out all of our SCO materials was actually through a deal room. So I was doing internal deal rooms as well to support everybody that was within our organization, because not everybody had our CMS as well. So it was great that everybody could get all of the content that they needed, have it right there. And when I was asking people on the very last day, when we were going through our deal room presentation, was how easy was it to find all of your information for SCO? And we had them rank it on a scale of 1 to 5. And there was not a single thing below a 5. So everybody found it incredibly easy. And I said, now take that and imagine how your customer could feel if all of their stuff that they had, all the 9 emails that you used to send out to them, go back and look at that email from January 2nd, go back and look at from March. What if everything was all in one spot? And I can tell you right now, we are sitting at an 89% adoption rate on our deal rooms, which has now increased our closed won percentage to 48% versus the 28 that we were at prior. So we're seeing a massive increase through that as well too. So it is incredible to see the power of these deal rooms, both externally and internally. And one of the other things that we're doing for our internal to get our new hires accustomed to this is we're actually doing a boot camp digital sales room. So that way, before they even have any of their login information, they can actually go into a deal room and get all of the boot camp materials that they need prior to them even joining our team.
Super interesting. It's an amazing story. And I love the internal adoption metric you shared is interesting. Did you roll it out to the whole sales team at once, or was it more, let's start with a small team and then people could self-select whether they wanted to use it? How did you think about that rollout, Matt?
4 people. That's it. 4 people. And it was great to see it. I picked 2 really high performing reps and 2 struggling reps. And it was funny to see the struggling reps actually had a much easier time putting these deal rooms together because they were like, oh, for sure, this is actually going to boost my confidence and close my deals a little bit more. And then our high performing reps, there was some force management that needed to be done. But at the same time, though, it became such an easy second nature of it that it was almost like, if I don't do it, I'm not going to close that deal now.
What about you, Zach? How are you thinking about that rollout plan? Are you starting with a small team, rolling out to everyone at once? How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah. So like I said, I've been starting with a smaller group, but I've also just been tapping on shoulders of sales managers, onboarding other enablement people here at Jamf, saying, hey, look at this great new thing that we have. Do you have anyone that might want to try this out? And more often than not, they have a handful of people that want to try it. And then I've slowly been building that network of digital sales room users here at Jamf. And then their peers hear about it and see how great they are. And I just reached out to another group yesterday to explain them. And they said, we'd heard about these and we want to try them. So I'm just really getting those stakeholders throughout Jamf to build the hype for me. And then when their peers are ready, bringing them in.
And Zach, I'm curious how you're thinking about, is there success metrics tied to this initiative? Are you just looking to increase close rate? Is it rep adoption? Like, how do you think about this initiative and maybe evaluating whether, okay, you should keep using deal rooms in your sales process or not?
Yeah, certainly some of the more traditional metrics like close rate, that's what we're going to be monitoring. But we also want to see some reinvigoration of the tool that we're using that digital sales rooms are a part of. So hopefully at the end of this, we're going to see greater rep adoption of using this tool.
Gotcha. And what about you, Matt? Are there, I think close rates, obviously the big one, but are there other analytics and things you're looking related to the deal room? What's most important to you?
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback my response to Natalie's question around adoption. And I think, like, how did we bring the value of that? We actually spiffed the adoption rate. And that was probably more of the insight of what we were looking for. It was adoption versus close won rates. Because we can go ahead and tailor the messaging afterwards, but if we see the adoption and close rates as we're going through it, we can go ahead and continue to pivot our materials as we're going in there. So around the adoption side, that was the first and foremost metric that I wanted to measure. We actually ended up spiffing all of our deal rooms. So if you created a deal room, we would be able to see every opportunity that was attached to a deal room. We actually had a giant raffle of, I think it was like $3,000, that every time that you had a deal room, we threw your name into that bucket to win an additional $3,000. Now, on top of that, you also got to close more deals. So you still made more money. So it's that double-edged sword of a win solution. Now, we did see that there were some people that still were not moving that metric, but we actually ended up pulling everybody that wasn't doing a deal room into a deal review. And I asked them, show me all of the materials that you have sent to this customer. And they couldn't. And I said, I should be able to find this within 5 minutes or less. And you can't give me everything right off the bat. Now, they could have cheated, gone into Gong or gone into Chorus or whatever they wanted to do in Salesforce, but they were going straight to their email. And I said, that's exactly what your customer is doing. Your customer doesn't have all of this as well, too. So we actually encouraged them to do it. And I actually ended up doing a bonus for them that if they actually created any deal that actually closed with a deal room, we would actually give them 2 extra bonus entries into that as well, too, to help encourage those non-adopters in there. And like I said, now we're sitting at about an 89% adoption rate. I think like that moment there was that inspiration moment of, if you're experiencing this, is your customer's experience. And there should be no reason why your customer should experience this at all.
Yeah. Matt, you're giving me some good ideas for when we're a few months down this implementation timeline too.
Hit me up, man.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
I love that spiff idea. I haven't heard that one before. I would recommend that to doc customers. I think what we usually recommend at doc is just, it really comes down to the template. And so you need to have a strong template, and who makes that can be different in every organization. It can be sales enablement, it can be a sales leader, it can be marketing. It depends on your organization, but it really comes down to, what does that template look like? And then the adoption becomes really easy. Reps just have to click a few buttons to take that template, and then they can start to see the value of it. And We have found at Doc that what's helping grow Doc so fast is that there's a huge bottoms up adoption curve. As soon as reps start seeing other reps see a deal room, they're like, whoa, that's a way sexier way to sell. That looks way cooler. And people start getting jealous. That's interesting. And then that also helps you even grow to other use cases, maybe beyond just sales. And that's something I'm actually curious about. Like maybe Matt, have you experimented with using deal rooms for other things like customer renewals, which is essentially a deal for customers, or even customer onboarding? How have you thought about that?
Yeah, so one of the things, I haven't done it at my current company, but I've done it in the past. We actually focused primarily our deal rooms on the customer enablement side, which was super interesting. So, of course, there's always a professional services offering at most companies, whether it's a data entry or whether it's secondary training or whether it's like a re-implementation or anything else like that. But we always had that as an included bonus add in our deal rooms to help encourage that those customers would actually enroll in additional services as we were actually going through that renewal process. Now we had the renewal slides that we did on there in the pitch deck. We had the contract MSA links ready to go for them as well too. Mutual action plans of when, hey, if you don't sign by then, this is when your service gets turned off. And then all the recordings. And that really created an urgency for our renewals as well too. Now, most companies, renewals are pretty easy, but it's the additional add-ons or the cross-sell that we really want to focus on. And that is where the deal rooms really played in that. So the professional services offerings, anything extra that we would be able to get on for that additional renewal and decision timelines. That was bar none, probably the easiest way that we did it from a renewal perspective.
And we're getting close to Q&A time. So if anyone has questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. We can also pause, but I can also keep going with my questions. Maybe one more and then we'll do Q&A. How do you guys think about introducing a deal room to your customer? Do you say, hey, customer, here's our deal room? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'll go first on this one because it's like a talk script that we've actually, talk track. That's the word I was looking for. So the talk track that we've actually presented to our customers was, listen, we have a complex software and there's no reason for us to have our complex materials just floating around. So we're going to put them all in one giant place for you. That way you understand exactly where and when to contact us. You can share it to your internal colleagues as well too. That way we can also have everything in there. And if you have questions on it, you can either email me or drop it back into the same room. So that way you don't have to hunt for those emails 1,000 times. And the response that we get was, so you're creating me a website for all of our stuff? I'm like, yeah, essentially that's exactly what we're doing. And most people are so receptive of that because again, it takes away that like barrier of vendor versus partner. Because like you mentioned, Alex, if you're not a good fit, I want to make sure you have the right solution. That's a partner. That's somebody that wants to see you succeed. And we want to see them succeed regardless of whether it's with us or not. So we have to make sure that they are able to have that ability as well.
What about you, Zach? How are you coaching reps to introduce this when you roll it out?
Yeah. Since this is our journey with Jamf, we've been instructing them to give a similar sentiment, thinking we'll have to write out a talk track like that too. But towards the beginning of that journey, and an idea I got from another enablement peer launching them is actually having your reps open up that digital room with your customer on the line so that they know exactly what it is, what they can expect to see in there, how they can share it with their peers at their company, so that when they get that meeting follow-up, they know exactly what that link is going to take them to.
I love that advice. You stole mine. I was going to share that. Like at the end of your intro, end of your demo call, pull it up, walk them through, show the value.
Yeah.
I think it's also explaining to them that they can, to your champion, hey, use this as you talk to the CFO, use this as you talk to any other internal stakeholders, put the business case in there, make it an asset, not just for the seller, but for the buyer. And the content of the deal room should not just be everything about your company. It should be about their company and about why they're buying your solution. And then I think one other tip is, I don't know if you call it a deal room. I think that you can, but it's a little bit weird sometimes. There's a lot of different names for it. Information hub, shared workspace, just a place for us to collaborate. There's a lot of ways to do it. And then I think throughout the sales process, keep pushing them back to it. It's, hey, here's our sales pricing we talked about. Hey, here's the case study we referenced. Here's that product question. And you can point back to the content in the deal room and not just keep saying, hey, here's the deal room link. Here's the deal room link. I think oftentimes that's where people get a little tripped up on the seller side.
Yeah.
Cool. Does anyone have questions? Anyone want to pop in and we can talk more about buyer enablement, deal rooms, talk about Doc, whatever's on anyone's mind, or I can keep asking questions too.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm back. I was just curious because currently, right now, we are merging with another company, and that means we're going to have two sales teams. And as you were talking, my mind goes to them like, how can I use this while integrating two sales teams, all these different products? So I was wondering, have you seen any use cases similar to that, or how do you think it might work?
Now, I
And
can
so it's
actually
like
pop
two.
in with
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
yeah. So I've had a few of my beta users talk about this exact situation where they have some security seller counterparts. And what they love about using digital rooms is that they can tap on their shoulder, add their name to these, and they can both collaborate, add their content there, add some additional text. And it's really a great way to bring two different selling teams together.
I like that. Yeah.
I also think you can just easily set up two different templates, right? One for, I don't know if there's two different products, but if one, the new company's selling two different products, you can have one template that's more based around product A, one's around product B, or it could be the pages in the workspace. There's different ways to set it up, but basically streamlining the content, because from probably the buyer's perspective, they most likely are interested more in one product than the other. So you want to push that and then maybe slowly introduce the other one. So I think it comes down to how you templatize the deal room.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So the products are like complementing each other. What I was thinking about is I know that these two sellers that have these two different products are calling on the same customer. So it's just like, how can we streamline that and make sure it's not looking messy once we're fully integrated?
And I put an example in the chat of a deal room, but I think in there you can see we try and sell Doc as like different use cases. It's, do you care
Hmm.
most about sales deal room or customer onboarding, content management, CPQ? And so we have different pages that talk through the product that are most relevant to that person. And we'll often hide and show those depending on what they're talking to. I don't think the CPQ stuff is in there. I maybe hid that. But it's like, hey, here's what's most interesting. And then as you go through the buyer journey, you can pull them both together if they care about it. So it's all about personalizing the content to,
Right.
what that buyer cares about.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Alex.
Are there,
Ask more until we get some more going in.
yeah. Are there other ways to do buyer enablement outside of deal rooms? Like, how do you think about extending that concept? You want to go first, Matt?
No. I'm just,
I've got some
I know
ideas.
we've been in
I've
deal
got some
room mode.
ideas.
Yeah. All right, go for it, Zach. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when you frame just enablement in general through the lens of buyer enablement, you can really think of reinvigorating the use of some already established offerings. Does your company offer discussion platforms? Those are a great way for buyers to serve themselves and ask questions, find answers to FAQs without the help of a seller. And maybe in terms of enablement, that looks like refreshing your sellers, how much knowledge they know about those platforms, and suggest that they go out and share those community platforms. Does your company offer an online help center or self-service trainings? What are those offerings that your seller can suggest, but they don't have to be involved in?
yeah,
100%. Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
no, I struggle with this from like additional buyer enablement, right? And it's maybe because it's something I haven't like dove into 100%, but I look at it as this is the in tandem partnership that you should have with marketing. Um, and so Zach, you were alluding to like, do we have this help center? Do we have additional trainings? All of that stuff is like should be on marketing's radar when it comes onto it because it should be living free into the public as much as your company would allow it to. So I think it comes into the firsthand experience of where and when do our roles as enablers actually cross over into working with marketing to have it that way. And maybe that's why I was struggling with this answer was how do I stay in my lane while still promoting the additional enablement for everybody else? And I think a lot of it comes down to, so Zach, very much to your point is, do we have all these resources available? If not, we need to get them up there. Like we need to enable almost our marketing team to enable our prospects or customers or anybody else like that. So maybe I was just looking at it at a different lens from a marketer's side of things, but I think there's still an avenue that if your messaging is off from the marketing or site or one pages or your references, I think a lot of that falls onto the marketing side that we need to be able to enable them as well.
100% agree. I think it's like this whole product marketing world of how do you talk about the product for your customers and help them understand what it is they're buying. And I spend a lot of time now, like I'm basically the product manager for Doc, so I'm thinking a lot about things through the product lens. And I also would argue like product has a big part in enabling buyers, especially if you're doing proof of concepts or product-led growth companies. Like people are getting their hands dirty and using the product, and you need to develop a product experience that makes it very buyer friendly. Like the experience that a customer's getting when they first sign up for your product should be a little different than a 2-3-year-old customer in that same product. And you need to think about how you can deliver value through your product that sets them up for success and they can see the value of the tool. Any questions, or we can end it there too? Anything else on anybody's mind?
Erica, you were taking a lot of notes. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Any questions that you have? Natalie, you had some things to say.
Sorry,
Anything
no, this has just been really helpful. Thank you so much.
Of course. And so after this, we'll send the recording of the webinar and the deck I ran through. We'll probably send out that same deal room, but we'll add the webinar so in the chat. So if you want to bookmark that, you can play around with the doc deal room. And thank you all. Thank you so much for having me this morning. Thanks for spending Tuesday morning with us, and fun to nerd out about a topic I think way too much about, deal rooms. Thank you so much for the time today.
And Alex, on behalf of the squad, I just want to thank you for participating in this with us as well too, partnering up and getting the word about Doc out there. I'm excited to share this out and really promote what you guys are doing as far as the deal room, because buyer enablement is super huge. So Karina and I will work tirelessly get that out there for you guys, and we will kind of get all that out. So very excited, and thank you again. We appreciate everything that you're doing in the community as well.
Of course.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
This has been great.
Zach.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.